Hey there everybody, it's your boy HadesManticore here to give my opinions and thoughts on what else? The title of the video, the Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster. I know I'm definitely a shade late on the topic since the Silent Hill 2 remake is what we're complaining about more than anything right now, but maybe I'll talk about that some other time. I'm here to discuss Dead Rising's Deluxe Remaster. I also wanted to wait a bit before I made a definitive statement on the game. Let my thoughts on the game gel a bit before I started making anything. Outside that podcast I was on, of course. I finally sat down and fully beat the game since then, after some brief breaks for Galaxy Burger and Shining Force. If you haven't kept up with things, the Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster is a total remaster of a 2006 game featuring updated graphics, models, voice acting, and modernized controls as well. There's also a ton of mechanical changes, some gameplay updates, new outfits, and more. My thoughts are not particularly well organized, but bear with me, if you don't mind, of course. The first thing I want to say, and it's the main reason that I actually ended up lagging on completing the game for a bit, is that the DRDR crashed on me quite a bit. Now, I can't solely put this on the game itself, I don't think. My computer is getting up there in years. I was playing on the lowest settings possible, but regardless, it would crash a lot, which obviously was frustrating. That's the worst issue I suffer with this game, so I figured it'd be best to get it out of the way first. Moving on, I want to talk about the game's new controls, which are fantastic. All of your old moves and attacks return, but now come out far more reliably than in the original. Both roundhouses, your flash kick, but most importantly, your evasive roll. I cannot tell you how amazing it is to have your roll on a reliable button combination versus double tapping a direction with your thumbstick, which also sometimes just kind of went off randomly in the original too. That old system was so fucking jank. It's nice to have something good and updated. On top of the roll being on that more convenient button press, it has way more iframes than it used to. They were really generous with how many of those you got. It's kind of crazy how strong it is, really. Your zombie grapple counters are now also mapped to a button that you simply mash. All of them, so you can pick which one you want to use for a given situation. Which I don't even know if I did any of my counters intentionally in the original. I just spun that fucking joystick till I was free. Firearm usage is also vastly improved in this game for a few reasons. You can now move while you're aiming, which awesome, not gonna lie. Especially in situations like fighting Cletus, where you might just need a tiny little adjustment to get into a good firing position versus having to drop out of the aim entirely like in the original. Frank actually aiming his shots while firing in free run is great too. You can actually hit stuff in this mode now. It's awesome, and I actually used it a lot more than I thought I would. A really cool thing they've done with this one here is that they've actually re-implemented a few of the things that were cut from the original. Most notably, cop zombies who are wielding pistols can actually shoot you now, giving the basic enemies here a bit of a ranged threat. The rocket launcher was added back into the game too, which I kind of found out by coincidence entirely. I killed a special forces soldier, and assuming he dropped an assault rifle, I ran over to his body to pick it up, but I got a fucking bazooka instead. It's only 3 shots, but it's pretty damn devastating. Going forward with more interesting changes that I genuinely do like, all survivors are now fully voiced, giving each a bit more personality. They also jaw almost non-fucking stop, making random comments, informing you about hidden survivors that you might miss in a given playthrough, and constantly pointing out PP stickers for you to take pics of. Which, I won't lie, it's a little silly given the circumstances, but it is Dead Rising. It's B-movie schlock. I won't overthink things. Frank's critical conversations with them can now also be sped through as well, and your discussions with Otis can also be skipped through too without penalty. Which is nice, because Otis will still call you at very inconvenient times. A little bit of added dialogue that I genuinely do like is Thomas Hall, the youngest sniper, will actually break down and stop fighting you if you kill his dad and brother. It's a nice touch, though. I wish he could be saved. It's understandable he wouldn't want to come with me, though, since I did just kill his, dad and his brother. It makes sense. All the new costumes added are pretty great, too. They picked a good bit of logical ones, like Leon's RPD cop outfit, Chris Redfield's star uniform, and some of those more normalish ones, like Frank in a press outfit that you would see in a war zone. That makes sense. But they counterbalance this by adding some of the most ridiculous shit they could think of. There's a Liquor, there's RE3 Make Nemesis, Sodom from Final Fight, and fucking Rikuo from Darkstalkers is available as an outfit. I rocked the Sodom outfit for my whole first playthrough, and my big stupid shoulder pads basically ruined multiple serious moments. It was awesome. Great new costume selection for sure, and I'll also compliment the fact that any clothes you can pick up around the mall are added immediately to the lockers in the security room, so you don't have to hoof your ass to a given location anymore. Also, there's a blender in the security room now, which is a very nice addition. Honestly, the mixed drinks were always a cool thing to create in-game, but I feel like there just weren't enough blenders around to make it, easily done. It's nice to just have a new one in the most convenient area of the game. I was asked in that DRDR podcast if I thought the game was more or less difficult now, and I answered pretty promptly there. After thinking on it a bit more, though, I've come to the conclusion that the remaster is actually much, much easier than the original. Though, there are certain things that this remake does that actually do make it a bit more difficult than the original game, but a lot of systems confluence and make the game a much easier overall experience, and I'll go over both right now, in fact. To start, how it's harder than the original, the zombies themselves are way more aggressive now. They will grab you far more often than the original. Cops will shoot you the second you're in range of those damn pistols, and all of these problems are obviously much worse in nighttime. When it comes to psychopaths, they're actually so much tougher now. I think they get a bit of increased damage resistance after taking a hit from any source. It's not like in the original where you could just 3-tap every psycho with the mini chainsaw. Boss fights feel like a genuine boss fight now. Some of the psychos really surprised me. Kent actually kicked my ass, for fuck's sake. The psychos are a lot bigger threats this time out, and they make you respect them. It's a good change. Another thing that makes the game much harder now, and not in a good way, is just how bullshit the special forces are. They are obnoxiously overpowered this time out. It is very possible for these guys to stunlock you to death with their assault rifles. It only takes 2 guys to do this, and the odds of you dying like this are only increased as more join in on the inflating fire. They also basically only travel in 4, so it's pretty easy to just get picked by these guys. Be sure to get them one by one or engage them at very far range first. As for the last thing that's made the game a bit more difficult, it's the opposite side of the coin, the survivors. They are way more fragile than they were in the original. I recall very distinctly that I was escorting that first group, Bert, Aaron, Lay, and Sophie, typically your first big group of survivors when the convicts first spawn. I set them to run as far away from me as I could while I fought those guys. They left my vision for 1 fucking second and Bert was dead instantly. I think the devs even understood that the survivors are more fragile now than the original, since you can actually find a book that increases their damage resistance. This was not in the original. Additionally, there's also a book that boosts gun damage that Carlito drops in the first fight. Also not in the original, but a nice addition for sure. It's also worth mentioning now that any sniper enemies like Carlito 2 or the Hall family now have laser sights to let you know when you're being targeted. A good change. But as for things that make it much easier, the survivors are far more competent than they were in the original. If you arm them, they'll actually use their weapons constantly and will reasonably defend themselves against any zombies. Even better, there's now a ramp up to the safe house instead of just a block that everyone gets stuck on. It makes getting them back way easier for sure, a great change. It's also way easier to level up in this game. Your pictures are worth almost double than that in the original. On top of that, you also get a bonus amount of PP based on how many survivors you're willing to escort back to the safe house at one time. So you're getting a ton of PP based on the survivors you rescue on top of how many you have at you with one time that you're rescuing, which can be up to 8 like in the original, but I don't think it's restricted to that. I think you can have even more. All of this helps you level up hella quick. I'm also pretty sure that Frank is just a bit faster by default, which makes getting around the mall easier, of course. I want to say that you get more time in general than the original, but it could also just be, that I'm faster. I was taking the same paces that I was when I played the original game, since I still basically kind of remember everything when random survivors spawn and stuff, and I found myself having way more time than I did in the OG. Talk about the most obvious difference in the game, every character has a new voice actor, and it's obviously something that's caused a lot of debate for obvious reasons. I think I can best describe the new voice acting in this game as a lateral move, not a straight upgrade or downgrade. A lot of the new voice actors are fine. New Frank is good, new Carlito, Isabella, and Jesse are pretty good too. The new survivor voices are alright, none of them bad or grating at all, but there's a non-ignorable portion of the new voice actors that are just downright worse than the original. Brad is the biggest offender for sure, but Cliff and Steven are also way worse than their original game counterparts. They stick out tremendously. Probably shouldn't be too mad about it in regards to Cliff, since, well, original Cliff was Steve Blum, but still. The new cast is a side grade at best, to put it as simply as possible. I personally lean more towards the original cast if you would ask me which is better. Talk about the biggest elephant in the room with DRDR. Its original localization was censored a decent bit, unfortunately. Most notably, Psycho Larry Chiang got a total makeover. Certain dialogue, like Cliff calling you a filthy communist, have also been altered to be less offensive, I guess. Larry I can kind of understand. I mean, he used to look like this. Couldn't understand the change, but I miss how gross he used to look, Like, he used to be covered in blood, and you could see his man tits through the sweat-soaked t-shirt. He should be a bit more grimy me versus just being in perfectly white clothing. The dude's a butcher, for fuck's sake. Hell, the whole meatpacking area now is a lot more clean, which I really don't like. Larry's a demented butcher at this point. I don't think he'd be cleaning up everything like this. Or maybe he would. I don't fucking know. As for removing Cliff's commie lines, why? Who the hell is that gonna offend? Some commies? They don't have any money. I'm not a big fan of altering the old stuff like this in general, though. I really don't like the removal of the erotica tag, honestly. It's just stupid. Silly as it sounds, I think horror and erotica do kind of go hand in hand, and just getting rid of it makes no sense. I don't really think it upsets anybody by keeping it in there, you know? Oh well. As for the rest of this video, well, I'd just like to talk about some bits and bobs I've noticed that are different from the original. Stuff I might or might not like, but it's more a preference thing, honestly. Every area in the mall is now separated by a door you need to press Y to get through. Some of the areas in the original had this transition, of course, but areas like the path between North and Wonderland Plaza or the main plaza and the movie theater were totally open. You could just drive or walk or skateboard right through. I find this mildly annoying, I won't lie. I assume the new doors, even to places like the movie theater, are to reduce the number of zombies in a given area at one time since they're, you know, more graphically impressive. There's also just quite a lot less zombies now. Once again, I assume this is performance related. Everything is a lot more detailed, so cutting back on model numbers in this area makes sense to do, but it makes the zombies a little less intimidating. Thankfully, they reduced the amount of queens you need to collect for the Isabella quest in overtime mode, down to 5 from 10. Thank God, that was a super annoying fetch quest. The turret segment against Brock's tank also goes way quicker now, which I'm grateful for, since the original's turret segment did kinda drag for a bit. The Brock fight itself was also way easier, because intermittently, after kicking his ass for a bit, you get a button prompt where Frank hits him with a grapple, and it does an assload of damage. I'm not sure if that was needed with the improved controls, but it's an interesting addition. I'm not gonna hate on it. The last thing I want to mention is something I worry I might not articulate well, so I hope this makes some sense. I feel like there's a lot less weight in the world of DR, if that makes sense. Like it used to be, if I had to push through zombies in the original, they had really good weight to them. They were very difficult to move out of the way, especially when you were carrying a survivor. Versus now, where zombies will just kind of slide out of the way if you're trying to press your way through. Regardless of what you think of him, Crobcat's new video on the DR actually illustrates my point perfectly. The lack of weight and stuff, I mean. Like, go check that out. I don't necessarily agree with everything that was presented in that video, but it pops up later on in the vid. It perfectly illustrates my thoughts on like how weightless you feel in this world, you know what I mean? To wrap my thoughts up, overall, I think the Deluxe Remaster is just fine. It's a step forward in terms of gameplay, controls, graphics, and most things, but a step back in terms of dumb censorship, minor changes, and honestly voice acting too. I am happy this exists, since hopefully if it does well, it means more Dead Rising in the future. Hopefully a Dead Rising 5 versus any more remasters like this. Honestly, I don't think Dead Rising 2 or Off the Record need full-on remakes like this one. They're perfectly good games in their own right that improved on the original Dead Rising in every way. Plus, I'm not gonna lie, Dead Rising 2 would suffer way more changes than DR1 in terms of characters in the game. That's just something I do not really care to see. But as long as the original Dead Rising is still readily available, I'm fine in totality with this remaster. Capcom is pretty good with keeping the originals available. Like, they recently just added the original Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 on GOG. This is a contrast to the Night Slashers remake, which the only port of that was removed before the remake came out. It's just shit, but as long as the original's available, I'm fine. Anyway, that's been my thoughts on the Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster. Thanks a ton for watching if you did. Feel free to drop your opinions on the DR in the comments below. My name, as always, is HadesManticore, and this here channel is CityStateManticore. Be sure to like and subscribe, because as always, more content to come. See you all in the next episode. Goodbye.